United South Broadway Corporation, promoting community building, youth development, fair housing, and fair lending in New Mexico since 1986. We work with community advocates in 6 key areas: fair housing and fair lending, crime prevention, financial literacy, locally based commercial development, and opportunities for youth. USBC offers free HUD-certified housing, counseling, and legal services to homeowners statewide facing mortgage delinquency or foreclosure. And we offer anti-racism trainings for policymakers. Welcome to United South Broadway Corporation.
Hi, I'm Debbie Norman with United South Broadway Corporation, and with me is Diana Dorn-Jones, our Executive Director. And people often ask us what we do and how we got started. And Diana has been here since the very beginning, and so she's going to be able to tell us about the history of the organization and what our main focus, housing, and how that's evolved over the years. So Diana, can you tell us a little bit about the early days of United South Broadway and the Peace in the Streets campaign and those things?
Well, I'm probably one of the earlier people, but there was at least 2 directors before me with very short terms. This organization was started by neighborhood people, my parents being one of them, my mother. They were looking for a way to address housing in this neighborhood, affordable housing, because there was a lot of real estate contracts taking place and a lot of abuses that go with that. And so they thought this just can't continue to happen. And so they worked with the city of Albuquerque and with HUD and came up with a program to do loan guarantees so that people that wanted to buy a home and stabilize the neighborhood through home ownership would have that opportunity. They could buy a house, and then the city would provide a subsidy to bring the house into affordability, and thereby bringing about home ownership, increasing the home ownership levels in neighborhoods like South Broadway. And of course, over the years, this program began to expand because any good idea should, if it's good for South Broadway, it should be good for some of the surrounding neighborhoods like Santa Barbara, Martinez Town, and others. So we began to work in that regard to do the same kind of programming in other neighborhoods, because the idea was to stabilize these old neighborhoods and give opportunities for future generations to stay in the neighborhoods and not leave the neighborhood.
Okay, well, that's history that I didn't even know, so I'm glad I'm sitting here learning it from you, Diana. So
the Peace in the Street campaign is what you ask about as well. And I think that just goes to the fact that United South Broadway is a community development organization. But of course, over 30 plus years, we've evolved into being a civil legal service organization and to doing many other things. But we could still have that mentality and the culture of a community organization that's active in the neighborhood in which it lives. And even though we're statewide around our work today, we always keep a local focus around the historic neighborhoods in the downtown core, because that's where we started. And that's kind of the heart of the organization. And we feel like it's important to be in the role of advocacy and providing resources to neighborhood people. So in the Peace in the Street, I'm a resident of South Broadway. I was born and raised in this neighborhood. So it's not unusual for us to try to do something like that. Peace in the Street campaign came about because people were coming in and out of our neighborhood, doing drugs. It was in the heyday of the drug trade, not just in South Broadway and not just in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This was going on across the country. But we felt like we had to create a safer space for children to grow up and for elderly people to enjoy their years of retirement as they were living in the neighborhood. There was a lot of gun violence. We found that there were people coming into our neighborhood from other parts of the country. Easy access, because we're right off an interstate. And so big trucks were coming in and bringing drugs, purchasing drugs. And it was not really a safe thing. So our neighborhood association, of which I was a member at the time, we got together and we said, I guess our mantra was kind of like Fannie Lou Hamer. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired, because everybody was complaining all the time. We said, we can't continue to do this. And it was getting more and more dangerous. And so we just decided we've got to be vocal. We've got to stand up and take a position. And so Peace in the Street came about through actually weekly marches in our streets. Every Friday, 6 o'clock. We come home from work, we change our clothes, we put on our tennis shoes, get our shakers and our bullhorns, and meet our neighbors at a designated place. We'd always start, because this is a community of faith historically, we'd always have be met with by either a priest or a minister, and we'd start with prayer, and then we'd walk up and down the street behind a banner saying, Somos vecinos, we are neighbors, so that we could send out a message that this is not a neighborhood that's going to tolerate that kind of behavior. And so we kind of laid the groundwork for this work in Albuquerque and beyond. And so it was also kind of looking at taking license plates. We had a strategy. We would actually work with license plates, get license plates, and write letters to people saying, your car has been seen in our neighborhood, engaging in what appears to be illegal activity. Check the box, which one? We would check the box. And we would send letters and just say, this is not acceptable behavior. And we ask that you cease and desist from this behavior in our neighborhood.
Did you get people responding to that?
Lots. Because what we also would do, when things look suspicious, we had people that we put eyes and ears, because there's a role for everybody in that kind of advocacy. We stopped children from marching with us because it became too dangerous for children to be a part of that march. But there were things they could do. They could do posters, they could do signage that we would do when we had little rallies. Elderly people, we didn't want them doing that either. But they're home all day and they see everything. So we had a hot spot sheet. So they would mark anything that looked irregular. And we worked with local police department. Now that's kind of unusual for neighborhoods like ours to have a relationship with the police department. But we said, we're going to take you on a path of neighborhood literacy, how you conduct yourselves in neighborhoods like ours. And it was a long-term process. But in the end, our neighborhood won National Neighborhood of the Year across all categories, competing with neighborhoods all across the country. We went to Pasadena to get the award. And so we competed against everybody. We won every award. And the big thing about it that I can say it was solidifies a relationship is that our chief of police sent our area commander with us.
Oh, that's wonderful.
He accompanied us to that.
Accept
so
the
people
award.
were kind of like, this is interesting, you know?
Right.
But you have to go on a journey of trust and re-education of how police do business in your neighborhood. Serve and protect is what your car says. And that's what we expect. And we'll work together to do that. So I was telling someone the other day, we would meet with Captain Widener, and we tell him how his officers may be conducting themselves in our meeting, the kind of language they were using, and say, that's not acceptable, Captain Widener. He would take it all down. He'd burn up the piece of paper that the note was written on, wanting to instill trust in us about what we were telling him. So it was a really unique relationship. So we still have that going on. That we're not that was some 30 years ago, right? Right. We're not perfect. We also put in place something, because we stepped back and said, now how did our neighborhood get that way? What happened? Well, we realized that the broken window syndrome was going on, and that was crime prevention through environmental design. If you don't fix your neighborhood up, if you don't have a sense of welcome and statements to say, when you drive through an area, somebody lives here. And so when you visit someone's home, you begin to respect that space when you know they live there. So we begin to put signage in our neighborhood that says, welcoming you to South Broadway. We begin to put art by working with the School of Architecture and Planning, the City of Albuquerque, 1% for Public Arts, to do bus stops and to do alley closures that were decorative. And we brought the whole neighborhood into that design process. Children, elderly people, so that we have a symbol that people can look at and say, recognize and say, this neighborhood belongs to some people. And so when I enter this space, they have an expectation as to how I will conduct myself. And that's exactly what we have.
Setting expectations and a feeling of this is a neighborhood, this is a community, and these are people.
And we have a sense of ownership of it.
Yes, right.
So that's kind of what, and so it was so funny because we started this whole thing was just working on we had a problem with a pothole in our neighborhood. When I came into the neighborhood coming back from Los Angeles, I came back and saying, well, housing, we got to fix this neighborhood up. We got to do this, we got to do that. And it was like people sitting stare at me at a meeting. And then I went home and I told my dad, who was one of the first neighborhood people and the first president for the neighborhood association. And I said, Dad, they just, he said, well, what else do they want to do? I said, well, they keep talking about that pothole over on Walter. He said, go fix the damn pothole. Okay. So it's like, okay. So we organized around that. We organized and trained ourselves and others. We went and looked at the pothole. We got sand out of the pothole. We put it in bags. We sent it to other places. What kind of material? Because the elders were telling us, They fill that thing every 3 months, but it just keeps coming back. So that tells us something wrong with the material you're using. So we begin to educate, write letters to all the appropriate agencies in the city of Albuquerque and others, and we begin to put ourselves into a position that we expect certain services. There's an expectation in our neighborhood now that you will do certain things in our neighborhood. So we organize though around that. So we went from filling a pothole to fighting crime, okay? 0 to 60.
60. Well, they're related.
Exactly.
It sounds like from what you said.
But
you
it just
know, the
tells you
broken
that you
window
can
syndrome.
organize around the smallest of things. It's just about bringing people together and having a common understanding about what it means to each of us. That we all have a stake in it.
Right, that sense of
neighborhood.
Community, neighborhood.
Right.
So that seems to be a common theme that came up and went through the Back to Broadway movement.
Yeah, because I think the other thing is that we noticed is that we needed to create spaces to keep our children here as they were growing up and going to college, and we didn't want them to leave the neighborhood. And we also wanted elderly people to be able to live. And so when you do housing development, the biggest, the most expensive thing is land. That drives the cost of housing, how much you pay for that parcel. And so we said, there's a lot of vacant land in our neighborhood, vacant lots. And we got that understanding by looking at our crime prevention work, because bad things can happen on vacant lots, and we began to document those lots. And so at some point, we got in a relationship with the city of Albuquerque and the School of Architecture and Planning. And we began to work at University of New Mexico, and we began to work with them the planning department, for one, is to help us identify every vacant lot in our neighborhood, 3 neighborhoods, South Broadway, Bud Ellis, as well as San Jose. So we wanted to see what kind of vacant lot inventory do we have in our neighborhood. Then we wanted to look and see, are those lots developable? Do they have utilities on them? Was a house there before that if you could develop a house there without a lot of expense because the utilities are already running in there? Or is it an environmental hazard? Have there been dumping going on? What's going on? Tell us about this lot. And we did that so that we would know, but we also wanted to, at some point, invite developers into our neighborhood to do housing development. And the reason most big developers don't come into neighborhoods like ours is because they don't have time to go around and looking for lots. They go out on the west side and buy big parcels of land and it's cost, you know. But if they have a navigator within the neighborhood that can identify those and become co-developer with the builder and the architect, then we can be the ones that usher you in. We can give you the portfolio of those lots. You can pick them, and we can work together. The other thing that we did with the University of New Mexico is that we also said the kind of housing that comes into our neighborhood is important. What it looks like in terms of, does it fit in? Now, South Broadway is really unique because, and a lot of these neighborhoods, because we have a variation of housing, and that's what makes it interesting. We have old Victorians, we have, adobes, we have all kinds of things. But we wanted to look at the kind of housing that is expandable, can shrink and grow as a family does. And so, and we also talked to neighbors. We did some convenings. I think it's really important to call the neighbors together. So what do you like about this? What kind of house would you want? How does it have to fit? Well, we found out that nobody wanted a garage in front. We didn't want a west side house because when you have a garage in front, you don't visit with your neighbors. We use our front yards to talk across the fence to each other. We use our backyard. We don't want a garage where you drive in, you don't see your neighbor because you get out of your car inside the garage. And maybe at most you meet your neighbor when you're going to the mailbox, maybe, and you just wave, but you don't build a sense of neighborhood. And so they wanted garages for storage because people have a lot of storage outside. Well, it's because we don't give them storage elsewhere. So so all of those things came into the design guidelines discussion between the 3 neighborhoods in the School of Architecture and Planning. And then we went to the city and said, okay, we've got design guidelines for housing. We've identified lots. Let's do a pilot project, Back to Broadway. And so we not only did we put in, I think we did 7, we tested those single family housing plans out with 7 houses that were scattered in the neighborhood on vacant lots. So we bought them and developed them. And we worked with a major builder, and a major architect, because we wanted to also demonstrate if you do this, you can draw those kind of developers in So we had Sivage Homes, who's not here anymore, but they were a big builder. And Sivage Homes did those properties for the houses, a single family. And then, of course, we did the Broadway Vistas. That was a great, everybody was pushing us to put high density in our neighborhood. Well, that's kind of like, we don't really want high density. We kind of like the way we're spread out a little bit, but we know there's a need to do something on vacant lot. That was a piece of land that was owned by a person who lived in another neighborhood in the downtown core. And she was able to sell it to us for a good price. And we held on to it for a long time. And it was vacant for over 30 some years. So when we got ready to do something, we thought, well, nobody likes it the way it is now, but what would they do if we just plop something on there? We said, we need to start talking to people. So I believe that you have to bring in architects and planners into your organization to do those kinds of things and help move that kind of movement, help to make it happen. Plans and convenings and facilitated meetings. And so we worked very closely with the planning department. And so we walked the streets and we told people, we bought this and here's what we're thinking. Are you interested? We convened several neighborhood meetings with people that were directly impacted by that lot. And so we came up with, okay, we can justify building these housing units, condominiums, condos, because it's on a traffic corridor on Broadway. It's near a bus stop. And so it's not coming into the heart of the residential area. It's not going to be towering over houses and looking into people's backyards. So we tested it, it worked. And so moving on to the next thing.
and it involved the community and the planners and the architects. There was community engagement all along.
I think what neighborhoods make mistakes, like our, older historic neighborhoods are always on the cutting edge of trying to do things and preserve themselves, that you have to go and look for the experts and bring them into your organizations and bring them into community. Because often, people say, oh yeah, you're working with planning department. Well, planning department, we worked with the School of Architecture. We wanted them to understand that there's a role for architecture in old historic neighborhoods. Poor people need artwork too in our neighborhoods. We want it, we value it, we produce it, and often don't get benefits from it. And so that was just a way of, I think that's one of the things that I was able to bring to the organization as being a former banker, a corporate banker, is that we can't get anything done on our own. We have to open up our doors to some degree to bring others in, but at the same time, we have to learn to be good clients, because it doesn't matter who you contract with. If you're not a good client, you won't get what you want. And so we learned the skill of being good clients and also overseeing contracts of what's supposed to be done. So we kind of became better stewards of our neighborhood.
So you were, talking about the planners and developers need to have neighborhood literacy, and the neighborhood needs to have client literacy.
Exactly. And you look where we sit. We sit in the heart of downtown in these old historic neighborhoods. The University of New Mexico, quite frankly, sits in these neighborhoods. So we look up that shining building on the hill that all of us pay taxes on. What does it do for us? What does it contribute to neighborhoods like ours? And so we said, we're going to tap that door and talk about what resources are supposed to be there.
Right. Well, this is very interesting to me, because now I'm getting a history lesson. I just sit in my little office and do what I'm told.
Do lots of stuff.
Yeah, well,